Have you ever noticed that whenever the topic of older D&D editions comes up, there's always talk about a single monster that could single-handedly stop a party in its tracks, or worse, just completely wipe them out. What's interesting though is that very often this had little to nothing to do with the amount of damage output that a monster had or the amount of hit points that it had, but rather it was more about just understanding the creature. That was almost the challenge in and of itself. A gelatinous cube was so much more than a low-tier monster with crappy action economy, because you first just needed to not just notice it, but understand what was happening in a world where things seemingly suspended in midair could be caused by anything. A rust monster wasn't after your blood nearly as much as it was after your metal, and if you just charged headlong into battle, odds are you've probably already lost the fight. I think this is one of the more crucial elements of the discussion that people often miss. It can be so easy to look back at older editions of the game and just laugh about how insane and lethal so many things were, but it's the reason for that lethality that often goes overlooked. In a lot of ways, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was more of a puzzle game than the combat engine that 5e has largely become. Monsters in AD&D were often puzzles that were embedded into the world. They weren't really designed to be fair and balanced fights, where the party has all the answers, kills the thing, and regenerates their resources and just moves on with their day. The game wanted you to think before you engaged, or you could be putting everything at risk. Page 8 of the AD&D Player's Handbook states this very clearly when it reads, "Superior players will not fight everything that they meet, for they realize that wit is as good a weapon as the sword or the spell." If you couldn't face a challenge or were running low on resources, or just didn't have an answer that you needed, the game expected that you would retreat and come back when you were more prepared. "He who runs away lives to fight another day" is another quote from the same paragraph. Comparing this to modern day 5th edition, the game for the most part is a well-tuned combat engine. The math is pretty sound, and despite some variances, every class feels pretty damn powerful. Hit points are a defined and well-calculated resource that are recoverable, measurable, and predictable. Players are super heroic in their capabilities. Pretty much anything that you need to handle just about any realistic threat that's going to be headed your way is right there in front of you on your character sheet. Instead of being a question that players had to answer, monsters now are often seen as just being big bags of hit points with a few extras tacked on. In most cases, you just solve the encounter by just outrolling the enemy or using whatever godlike features you have in front of you, and rarely through creative or unique ideas. And I want to be clear that that is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a very different design goal. So in order to understand why monsters in AD&D felt so different than they do today, it's really important to focus a lot more on the assumptions that the game system made rather than just looking at stat blocks. Like I said earlier, AD&D didn't assume that every encounter with a monster was going to end in a fight. Instead, the dungeon would be presenting a problem to the players, and the monster is just one expression of that. Sometimes the correct option was to fight, and others, it wasn't. Some of the best ways that these puzzle monsters work is when they would actually attack the way that the players or the party are approaching the game itself rather than their character directly. Something like the aforementioned gelatinous cube is a perfect representation of that. Mechanically, it's not the most sophisticated of monsters, but the thing is that it exists in a world where the game assumes that players are always reading their environment. Why is this corridor devoid of any debris? Why are there bones floating in midair? Why is there a faint shimmer when I look down that hall? This is in pretty stark contrast to 5th edition, where engagement and initiative are typically the default assumptions. Monsters have abilities and stats that are balanced around expected party output and recovery capabilities. And even when monsters are more dangerous, it tends to be in a way where the system assumes that we can recover and stabilize from it. This is probably more true than ever in a post-2024 Monster Manual world, where monsters are, by and large, significantly more deadly than their 2014 era counterparts were. But the biggest way that they've achieved this is through bigger numbers. Crazy initiative bonuses that almost ensure that a monster is going to be first or at least early in a round. Attacks that are basically spells but can't be countered that can be launched 3 or 4 times in a single round. And a plethora of on-hit no-save effects that can hinder allies with various status conditions. These are just some of the ways that 5th edition is trying to capture some of that lethality and intensity of AD&D, but they've done it through numbers rather than creativity. And I want to be abundantly clear again, that is not a criticism, it's just a design goal, one that I also happen to think is generally for the better. 5th edition is, at its very nature, a heavily attrition-based game, and as a result, assumes that monsters are more often than not speed bumps rather than roadblocks. This feeling is probably best encapsulated in the introduction to the 2024 Player's Handbook, where it says the following. There is no winning and losing in D&D, at least not in the way that those terms are usually understood. Together, you and friends create an exciting story of adventurers who confront perils. Sometimes an adventurer might come to a tragic end. Even so, the other adventurers can search for powerful magic to revive their fallen comrade, or the character's player might create a new character to carry on. No matter what happens, if everyone has a good time and creates a memorable story, they all win. Comparing this with the AD&D Player's Handbook is night and day. First edition had a whole paragraph about the things that smart players would do to avoid certain death, and 5th edition is just like, yeah, if you die, that's probably fine, but I mean as long as everyone's having a good time, I guess. Fail states in 5e are typically short-term, recoverable, and pretty clearly signposted. You are specifically meant to engage with most monsters directly because the system was built around that very engagement. Surprise rolls in the 2024 Player's Handbook have even changed to just give disadvantage on initiative rolls, a far cry from what they once were in earlier editions. Generally speaking, you or someone in your party probably has the answer to a monster, and you or someone in your party probably also has the answer if something does go wrong, and the game assumes that. The game wants you, as the player, to feel like you're having fun all the time and getting to use the stuff that's sitting there right in front of you. That's not a criticism, that's a design goal. And again, one that I largely stand behind. That is not really how early AD&D worked. The game didn't really care if you were having fun or not. And if you died, it's probably because you did something wrong. So then the question becomes, how can we translate some of those AD&D vibes per round into 5th edition without just constantly killing the party and making their abilities feel completely invalidated? I think a good place to start would be to look at some examples of monsters to kind of get a better idea of what I'm talking about. These quote-unquote puzzle monsters all tend to share a few different traits. They punish a default behavior like freely opening doors or storming down hallways, they reward caution and lateral thinking like investigating ceilings and inquiring about smells, and they can create consequences that persist long after the encounter ends, like destruction of items or causing lingering injuries. Rust monsters are a great example of a creature that has little to no interest in killing the players. It just wants their stuff. The combat portion in its entry in the 2nd edition monster manual reads, "Rust monsters are placid by nature, but when they get within the scent range of metal, they become excited and immediately dash toward the source." This is already something in itself that can be used to unsettle and unnerve players. You hear the sound of skittering feet clambering towards you, and as you peer cautiously around the corner, you spot this enormous yellowish insectoid-looking creature dragging its massive antennae across the ground. It appears to be actively looking for something. And if you know that the party is likely going to be encountering one of these, it's easy enough to telegraph some things that will help them out in the upcoming encounter. Perhaps earlier they spotted a sword and armor that appeared to have been partially dissolved due to contact with some kind of liquid. Maybe they came across a dead adventurer at the entrance to the dungeon, and despite still having their coin purse with gold still in it, the only thing that appears to be missing is their sword. Mechanically, the 2nd edition Rust monster could instantaneously destroy any metallic object that made contact with it. That included magical objects. Magical weapons did provide some degree of protection though, but it really wasn't all that much. They only got a 10% chance to be unaffected per plus that it had. So a +1 weapon, for example, had a 10% chance to not be destroyed, while a +2 weapon had a 20% chance, and so forth. And yes, I did say that was the percent chance to be unaffected, meaning that even a +2 weapon had an 80% chance to be instantly destroyed on contact. And this ability worked symmetrically, so whether the party hits the Rust monster or it hits them, the ability would trigger just the same. As a point of comparison, if we take a look at the 2024 version of the Rust monster, it tells a completely different story. It still has its antennae action. However, this one can only target non-magical items. Magical items are immune. And even then, it's still not instant destruction. The player gets the opportunity to make a DC 11 dexterity saving throw, which, even at lower levels, isn't horrendous, as dexterity is typically not dumped. But either way, even upon a fail, the item just gets a -1 to attack rolls if it's a weapon, or a -1 to its AC if it's armor. Armor then only gets destroyed if it brings the base AC down to 10, and the weapon only gets destroyed if it reduces the attack by 5. And if they do make it out of the encounter, even with some reductions to the item, a simple casting of a mending cantrip will solve all their problems. All those protections for non-magical items. And while the 5th edition Rust monster is only a CR 1/2 creature, so it's unlikely that the players are going to have an abundance of magical items anyway, the point is, it's not really teaching them anything either. You're probably not just throwing dozens of these at your party all the time, and if they do happen upon one later on in their adventuring careers, sure, maybe they might be a little bit nervous, but those nerves are going to be in relation to a feeling that doesn't even exist, since they are probably going to be decked out in more magical items at that point, which are completely immune to the ability. I bring up the Rust Monster because I think it's a particularly good example of a creature that doesn't even care about the players. It just wants their stuff. And this makes it a very interesting encounter, especially if the players don't know that going in from the get-go. It makes the players think about what they're about to do in a very different way than just, I run in and hit it with my sword. So what's the solution here then? Like, how can we actually bring some of that AD&D flair back into 5e? Rust monsters are still recognizable as the same creature, the thing is just that the stakes are dramatically lower. Magic items are immune, mundane gear is replaceable and generally fleeting, and the fix is a cantrip that is on 6 spell lists if we include the Artificer. This makes the consequences temporary and manageable and generally forgettable, which means the puzzle is forgettable too. The encounter just resolves cleanly and the items are probably restored back to their full effectiveness because the system expects it to be. Now, I'm not just sitting here and saying that the solution to this is to just make Rust monsters permanently destroy magic items. Permanent item destruction can just feel arbitrary and punitive, especially if it isn't signaled incredibly clearly. This is a core design difference from older editions of D&D to the modern day, and I would argue is a really good change. That being said though, there are still things that we can do, the simplest of which is probably to just make the ability able to affect magic items, and make it on a hit rather than being on its own ability attached to a saving throw. And if you're feeling really spicy, maybe make it so mending just doesn't fix it anymore. This type of adjustment is probably going to be really party specific though. Some groups will absolutely love the idea of having to track down some really powerful magical swordsmith to restore the weapon to its former glory, and other groups, not so much. They're probably going to hate the derailment, so you're really going to need to make this a judgment call based on the group that you're playing with. I also wanted to highlight another monster that has been updated for 2024 that I think does this whole thing really well. It can still catch unsuspecting players off guard and it still can be debilitating, but it does it in a way where there is still a workaround so you're not just constantly rolling up new characters every 10 minutes. The creature that I'm talking about is the Shadow, incidentally also CR 1/2. In 2nd edition, on a hit, Shadows would deal some damage and reduce your strength score by 1. These points would return within 2 to 8 turns, however if your strength was brought to 0, you died and would automatically revive as a shadow. Incredibly, 5th edition has largely kept this same concept intact, but just made it a little bit more fair. Now, on a hit from their draining swipe attack, shadows still deal damage and reduce the target strength score by 1d4, no additional saving throw is made. However, if they are killed by the attack, they will still rise as a shadow, but within 1d4 hours. This gives the party some amount of time to try to address the problem, bring their party members back to life, and all the while still having it feel like a very real and visceral consequence. On top of that, shadows also have some potential for counterplay in its sunlight sensitivity trait, giving it disadvantage on d20 tests. There are plenty of spells that can be used to trigger this trait, and most of all, a shadow can appear at any time during a campaign and still threaten even higher level parties despite their low to hit modifier. A high level fighter or barbarian dropping a bunch of strength points can be debilitating. This marks a significant difference from the very limited impactful time frame that a Rust monster has. Since I'm obviously not about to rewrite every single monster with some kind of a puzzle element embedded within it, which I also think is unnecessary, the goal here is to really give you some things to think about when you're preparing dungeons and running monsters to make the encounters feel a little bit more like older D&D without just being ruthlessly unfair. These are some of the questions that I like to ask myself during prep. First up is, does the monster ask a question before initiative is rolled? I'm obviously not talking about literal questions here, just things like, are there environmental clues about what's going on? Is there a strange smell in the air? Would an observer just notice that something is off? If I find that I'm always answering no to every single one of these questions, a simple solution is just to start adding a little bit more description about what I want to telegraph. Maybe I let the party know that there are some burn marks on the wall, or maybe the floor in some area has some cracks on it, or maybe there are some very precariously positioned corpses dotted around the room. Provide something to the player so they can understand that something else is probably going on. Question number 2 is the default response the wrong response? Does charging in and attacking just make things worse? Was there a better option than just I attack. I'm not saying that you need to aggressively punish a player that is acting brazenly, but maybe they just get caught up in an environmental hazard or something along those lines. So many other monsters have traits that can deal damage or impose various status conditions based on proximity. Maybe having some of those triggered right away can signal to the group that they might have made a little bit of a questionable decision and really heighten the danger. The third question that I'll ask is, does a mistake escalate the encounter or end it? I'm not a fan of just random instant kills of party members because it's not interesting to me and it's also not teaching anyone anything. An increasing threat, something like Daggerheart's countdown-based abilities that trigger on a set interval or after certain actions occur, can be a really interesting thing to explore, as they can simply create a sense of danger that has a more visible and telegraphed clock. The fourth question that I'll ask myself is the solution just a single spell or ability? Ideally, you don't want the answer to just be a simple sheet check. Something like if the player just happens to have the spell, then the entire threat is completely meaningless. This is similar to how the 5th edition Rust monster plays out, where if someone just has Mending, there is no more threat. Or the way that literally any curse works in the game because of the existence of the Remove Curse spell. What if the party just has no spellcasters, and if they can't win without having access to that certain spell, it's not really much of a puzzle? Or if the only way to kill the ghost in the haunted mansion is through a weapon that they had to find in another room that the party just didn't come across. If you're now just going to prevent them from killing the monster, that's not an interesting puzzle. Allow the party to use environmental and improvised solutions to problems, and don't worry about being so rigid about it. And the final question I'll ask myself is, will the party understand why something happened? Was cause and effect clearly communicated? If the whole group is standing around on the brink of a TPK going, what is even happening? Something probably messed up along the way. A simple example of this in action is something like a troll's regeneration ability. Maybe make it obvious that there are burn and scorch marks on the walls. And then if the party does deal fire damage, let them know that they sense something has changed within the troll, and then when it doesn't regenerate, highlight that on the troll's turn. Now here's the thing. The obvious problem with incorporating something like this too much into your games is that you do run the risk of turning the entire thing into just one giant poke check, where everyone always has their 10-foot poles out and they're looking at every single ceiling and floor tile and flipping every single corpse and asking for a perception check every 30 seconds. A lot of older AD&D games kinda did devolve into this, so ideally, we want to avoid falling into that trap. The good news though is that it is something that's fairly easy to do with clear information and descriptions. Monsters in the AD&D days, like the gelatinous cube, relied on you not noticing them because they'd impart massive negative modifiers to surprise rolls, making them almost impossible to spot. This is exactly the kind of thing that we want to avoid falling into because you turn the corner and are now engulfed. It is not all that interesting. Instead, you can say things like you come to a hall that is unnaturally pristine, lacking any of the debris or dust that you've seen elsewhere within this dungeon. This way, you aren't just instantly throwing them into something completely out of the blue. Instead, they are given the opportunity to react based on information that was provided. This goes back to the first question that I mentioned earlier about, is the monster asking questions before initiative is rolled? Something that I'll do in my games is to look for ways to reward players based on certain decisions or even sometimes just their character choices. Saying simple things like, those of you with dark vision would immediately notice that something about the ceiling is off, or maybe the druid player in their wild shape might get something like, there's no roll required for you, you can immediately smell that there is a foul scent emanating from the corner of the room. The final thing to remember is that for as much as this can make monster encounters fun and interesting and more exciting, just like anything else, it can be overdone. Not every single encounter needs to be a puzzle monster. Don't stack these things back to back to back in every single dungeon. Sometimes the flat out skirmishes that happen for no reason other than to drain resources are amazing too, and they should all be used together to ensure that you're maintaining variety within your sessions. Ultimately, for as insane as AD&D was, I still think that there is so much that we can learn from it and even apply in today's modern games. The 2024 Monster Manual already did so much of the heavy lifting for us by not only making creatures easier to run, but also hitting harder in the process. But that's only one part of the equation if we want to make sure that our players are having some really memorable encounters. Anyway, that's all that I got. Maybe let me know some of your favorite monsters from the AD&D days and some of the ways that you've been able to transpose them into 5th edition. Check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.